Now, there are a lot of other sources of Islamic law, and Islamic civilization developed a very original, often very brilliant legal tradition, system of jurisprudence. The two basic sources of Islamic law are the Quran and the Hadith, but there are others. I'll mention just the two most important. Firstly, there is something called ijma'. Ijma' means consensus. The idea is almost a democratic principle, that if you can't find a clear ruling in the Quran or the Hadith, you look at what the majority of Muslims consider to be morally correct in that situation. And that conclusion has the force of law. It's increasingly important nowadays with improved communications. We can actually know what the majority of Muslims are thinking about a given subject. In the medieval ages, it was largely a theoretical principle. The fourth one is qiyas, which is analogy, quite a technical area of jurisprudence. If you can't find detailed guidance for a legal problem in the Quran or the Hadith, or nothing forthcoming immediately in the ijma', then you can derive God's law by a process of analogy with an existing law. And again, I won't go into that into great detail. And there are other sources of law. For instance, maslaha, public interest, that which is in the public interest as understood and defined by the jurists, is also considered to be one of the sources of Islamic law. There's also recognition accorded to customary law, i.e. traditions, practices, conventions which are normal in society and do not contradict any of the other scriptural sources of Islamic law, are also regarded as being normative. So for instance, if a girl complains that she is not being given enough dowry, remember in Islamic law the girl gets the dowry, not the husband, that's the deal. If she says she's not getting enough and it goes to the court, then the judge will base his decision on what is normal in that particular society, on what is customary law, and will rule on that basis.
Does that mean within that particular Muslim society? I mean, because like an American Muslim, they're not going to base it on typical American society. They base it on typical American Muslim society.
Mm-hmm. Here it would be a lot more complicated. Normally Muslim societies are quite static, and you would judge what would be conventional for a woman's social background and what other comparable cases were receiving. Here it would be a lot more difficult, it's true. But then again, there are no Islamic courts here that would have to make the decision. It's very much ad hoc. I think Dr. Mir is going to be talking about gender issues, so I don't really want to steal his thunder, but this is an interesting reminder of the fact that Islamic law, really uniquely amongst the world's legal systems, attributed independent juridical personality to women. In England until the beginning of the present century, and in France until 1938, a woman lost her separate legal status when she married, and it was assimilated into her husband's. So she no longer had authority over her own wealth. In Islamic law, in all of the schools of Islamic law, a woman has absolute rights over her own property, and whether she's married or not is completely indifferent. In fact, I remember when I was working in a law office in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, and we would have cases of husbands who were going to go to jail for non-payment of debt, bankruptcy and so forth. And at the last moment, the wife would stride into the court and write a check and stride out again, and he would be released. And the judge has absolutely no right to force the wife to do that. She's an absolutely independent financial entity.